What will happen when a pregnant woman enters the forest to gather supplies and suddenly spots a bear cub trapped in a rope? As she tries to rescue the tiny animal, the mother bear appears out of nowhere. Without thinking, the bear attacks, leaving the woman seriously hurt and causing her to lose her baby. But after 30 long years, something amazing happens that brings happiness back into her life. In a small village surrounded by thick forests, lived a couple named Daria and Arkady. They had been married for 30 years, but many people in the village thought they were siblings because they looked so much alike. They shared the same last name, which only added to the confusion. In reality, their bond was built on love that had grown stronger with every year. They lived a peaceful life away from the busy city, enjoying the quiet of their small village. Arkady spent his days in the forest, gathering mushrooms, wild fruits, and hunting for food. He was a skilled forester and hunter, always bringing back something useful. Daria worked at a little shop in the village, selling goods to the locals. They dreamed of one day buying a car, which would make life easier in their remote village. But there was one thing that stood out. They didn't have children. The villagers often whispered about it. Some thought they chose not to have any, while others believed they hadn't been blessed with children. 30 years earlier, when Daria and Arkady had just married, Daria became pregnant. The couple was overjoyed, imagining a future with both a boy and a girl. But their happiness didn't last long. One afternoon, while Daria was walking through the woods, she stumbled upon a bear cub. Without thinking, she bent down to gently pet the small creature. In seconds, the mother bear appeared, angry and protective. Before Daria could react, the bear knocked her to the ground, leaving her injured. When Daria was rushed to the hospital, she received heartbreaking news. Not only had she lost the baby, but the injury meant she would never be able to have children again. The pain of this loss weighed heavily on both of them. Yet, through the sadness, Arkady and Daria's love only grew stronger. They stood by each other, finding strength in their bond. Though they could no longer have children, they didn't let it break them. As the years passed, they embraced their quiet life together, finding comfort and joy in the simple moments they shared. As New Year's Eve drew near, Daria and Arkady were excited to celebrate. Daria, as usual, worked hard to prepare a special meal for the evening. She roasted meat, baked fresh bread, and made Arkady's favorite desserts. After lunch, Arkady decided to head into the forest, hoping to catch something extra for the celebration. But as the hours passed and night began to fall, Arkady still hadn't returned. Daria started to worry. It wasn't like him to stay out so late, especially on the last day of the year when everyone stayed home to celebrate with their families. With everything ready, Daria sat on the sofa, glancing at the clock as the wind howled outside. Snow began to fall, covering the ground in a thick, white blanket. The hours crept by, and just when Daria's concern turned into panic, a knock echoed through the quiet house. Her heart raced, hoping it was Arkady. She rushed to the door and opened it quickly. But instead of her husband, a beautiful woman stood there, dressed in a flowing white gown. Her hair shimmered in the snowy light, and her clothes spoke of wealth and elegance, leaving Daria stunned. Daria, surprised but not wanting to be rude, invited the beautiful woman inside. She offered her tea and food, but the guest kindly declined. Instead, the woman took Daria's hand and looked deep into her eyes. "Your future will be filled with joy," she said, promising that Daria would soon have 2 children, a boy and a girl. Daria felt a mix of shock and hope as she listened to the woman's words. Before leaving, the mysterious guest thanked Daria for her kindness and stepped into the stormy night, disappearing into the swirling snow. Just moments later, Arkady came home, his face red from the cold. He sat beside Daria and noticed her excited expression. Curious, he asked what had happened. Daria shared the incredible story of the woman, and although it seemed unbelievable, Arkady could see the happiness shining in her eyes. As midnight approached, Daria and Arkady held hands, ready to welcome the new year together. Daria closed her eyes and prayed, asking God for the blessing of a son and a daughter. After the joyous celebration, the couple sat quietly, listening to the howling wind outside. Suddenly, Arkady heard strange noises coming from the front door. Curious, he went to check, thinking it might just be the wind or a stray animal. But what he found left him speechless. A tiny newborn baby lay in the snow just outside their door. Next to the baby stood a wolf, its yellow eyes fixed on Arkady's. The wolf didn't seem dangerous. Instead, It looked at Arkady as if it wanted to communicate something. After a few moments, the wolf turned and quietly vanished into the forest. Heart racing, Arkady quickly picked up the baby. The child was alive, with rosy cheeks from the cold but otherwise healthy. Arkady hurried inside, placing the baby on a soft mattress near the warm fire. He called for Daria, who rushed over. When she saw the baby, her eyes filled with tears. She could hardly believe it. Her wish had finally come true. Daria carefully picked up the little boy, cradling him gently in her arms. She felt a rush of love as she looked down at his tiny face. After warming some milk in the kitchen, she fed the hungry baby. He drank eagerly, finishing every drop, and then cried for more. Daria smiled, her heart swelling with happiness. The baby's bright blue eyes gazed up at her, and for the first time in many years, she felt complete. While the couple was filled with joy, they were also puzzled. How had the baby survived in the freezing cold, and why had a wolf brought him to their doorstep? The next day, Arkady called the local police to report the baby. An officer came to their home, listened carefully to their story, and promised to investigate. He advised them to keep the baby for now, and said he would let them know if anyone came looking for him. Days went by, but the police found no clues about the baby's origins. No one in the village had reported a missing child. As time passed, Arkady and Daria decided to adopt the baby, believing he was a gift from God, and they began the adoption process. One evening, a few months later, Daria was watching TV when something caught her eye. On the screen was the same woman who had visited her home on New Year's Eve. The woman was a famous fortune teller, known for granting wishes during special times of the year. Daria smiled, feeling lucky to have received such a visit. Their dream of having a son had come true, just as the fortune teller had promised. But Daria remembered that the woman had also said they would have a daughter. Days turned into weeks, and Daria began to wait for another miracle. She often stood by the door, hoping the wolf might return with a baby girl. Yet, as time passed, her hope began to fade. One day, Daria started to feel strange. A persistent pain in her stomach worried her, so she went to the village clinic for a checkup. To her surprise, the doctor told her she was pregnant, 3 months along. It seemed impossible after so many years, but it was true. Daria rushed home to tell Arkady, who was just as shocked as she was. Their joy knew no bounds. Months later, on the last day of the year, exactly 1 year after they had found their son, Daria gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The doctors couldn't explain how Daria had become pregnant after all this time, but to the couple, it felt like a miracle. Now they had both the boy and the girl they had always dreamed of, just as the fortune teller had promised. Their hearts were filled with happiness and gratitude. That's all for today. Now, it's your turn to share your thoughts about this story. What's the next story you'd like to know? Let us know in the comment section below. And be sure to subscribe so you won't miss any of these amazing videos on The Wild Wonder.